Welcome to Realcast, the weekly roundup of the real asset markets, and this is a special edition coming to you live from Singapore. I'm joined by Thomas Veith and Christiane Conrads of PwC from immediately outside the PwC offices here in downtown Singapore. Maybe Christiane, let's start with you, just in terms of, I suppose, some of your key takeaways from being here.
Looking at the Asian market, there's a lot of interest in European ESG strategies and standards, and there's great interest in best practice sharing. And good to see the last couple of days that sustainable finance is also on top of the agenda here in Asia, and that Singapore has very high ambitions to become one of the leading financial hubs in Asia for green finance.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting to see that developing. And I guess, Thomas, in terms of your take on it, what were some of the key takeaways, I suppose, from your trip here, but also on the event that we held, looking at, I guess, that link between Asia and Europe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the clear message is that Singapore is such an important financial hub with a growing importance. We saw over the last 12 months, I understand, a lot of capital flows from Hong Kong into Singapore. People are moving down here to Singapore. As we have seen, the residential prices are more or less exploding here on the rental as well as the purchase price side. So that's always a good sign. But I also heard from some clients that also culture is coming here. So it's a good framework. It's a good hub for people. They want to live here. And as Christiane said, there is a strong capital market, a deep capital market with a good REIT regime. So it's flexible. It's easy to set up entities and REIT structures here, which gives us a framework for good investments in Singapore and Asia, but also globally.
Yeah, and it was interesting, I think, to see that came through very clearly, I think, in terms of the session that we had there, the sort of move of both capital and people and businesses from Hong Kong, as well as mainland China over to here in Singapore. And Christiane, do you get a real sense that there's a drive here in terms of ESG? I mean, it's noticeable here, we're surrounded by greenery, that there's a big focus here on biodiversity particularly.
Yes, indeed it is. And it's also I'm very honored to be here. I'm very grateful to be able to see some really impressive projects regarding biodiversity. Singapore has started already in 1963 on a project called City in the Garden. And right now it's kind of leading when it comes to vertical farming. So Singapore has really leading projects in the area of biodiversity, for example, with green facades, with green rooftop gardens, and which really helps to bring down the temperature of the properties outside and inside, and therefore helps to save a lot of energy. Its impact on the neighboring buildings is also really substantial. So I think it's really worth coming here and look what we can learn from these projects.
Yeah, and I thought it was noticeable as well that Alex Jeffries of Savills Investment Management was talking about a kind of poly-crisis. He mentioned with a huge number of crises coming together. But that impact didn't seem to be felt as keenly here. It seemed to be a much more kind of optimistic take in comparison to Europe. Thomas, what was your impression around that?
Yeah, absolutely. That was also my feeling in general. Some of this crisis, like the interest increases, hit also Asia Pac, but the fundamental growth rates in some of the countries in Asia Pac, like in Malaysia, in India, in Indonesia, they are much more positive seen, and that's what we also seen, like European car producers, for example. They are diversifying their supply chain, so they invest more into factories in Indonesia and in India, which brings an upgrade into this country, more capital is flowing in, and real estate will always follow this capital flow. So that's a clear positive sign. As in Europe, we see more negative developments. We are talking about recessions, and it will come up definitely. And of course, we also have to do our homeworks around the energy crisis, which is not the case so much here in Asia Pac. So absolutely right. The general sentiment, also talking about, if you talk to Asian investors, would you invest in Europe versus Asia Pac? The message was, we have good opportunities in Asia Pac. We don't have to invest in Europe, but definitely Europe is still on the agenda. But we will see and wait until these energy topics are solved more or less, or there are strategies for that. And of course, the valuations are coming to a level where we are willing to pay compared to the interest increase we have seen in the past. And I also heard here that now Singapore bonds are trading at 4% yield. So also in Asia Pac, you have to compare, you need a a risk premium to this 4%. So, but the need to reevaluate in Asia Pac and Singapore doesn't seem to be so heavy as in Europe currently.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting to see that optimism here, but also that there was still very much a focus on a weight of capital waiting on the sidelines to be able to come in. I thought that was interesting, and certainly for me, given it's the first time that we've been in Singapore here as Real Asset Media, fantastic just to see the amount of development, and this is a city and how it's thriving and growing, and is very optimistic. Thanks very much, Thomas. Thank you, Christiane. Thank you for joining us, and look forward to seeing you next week for our regular roundup of the real asset market.